usually somebody like it's Alex Avila and Infante or Castellanos or whatever the case is. But to see 3 players producing, I mean, Riley Greene already has a 2-war season. It's again, I know this sounds like it's like I'm not, and John, I know you might think like I'm asking for the bear. I'm sounding like a desperate fan here, but it's progress.
Well, yeah, and like for me, I've been watching since 2010, and I've never really been able to say there's been exciting young talent at the major league level and the minor league level. I think, looking at the minor league level, you said ranked 13th in baseball. I think there's a lot of positive development there. I think Scott Harris has overhauled the farm system in a way with obviously this 2023 draft, but also having those 3 young hitters in the lineup really looking like building pieces for you. You have some other young pitchers on the roster like Reese Olson, Matt Manning, Tarek Skubal, who are trying to prove themselves. It's just really exciting time to be a Tigers fan, and it kind of gives you hope for the future that maybe Scott Harris has a plan moving forward, and we can talk about like a core, like Raj says, the trio of guys. Well, you can really hope that maybe there's some guys down on the farm that can add to that core and really lengthen this lineup. But I think, the last couple of days, especially the game against Minnesota, where they had the 4 home runs, Riley Greene, Kerry Carpenter, Special Torkelson combined for 5 extra base hits. To me, that was one of the best days to be a Detroit Tigers fan in years. Just having those 3 young guys, all homegrown, all looking like they're going to be here for the future. It was really, really good to see, and a really, a breath of fresh air for Tigers fans.
And the reason why, and I don't want to talk about the pitching so much because we've talked about homegrown pitching now. For the Tigers have been able to at least do that, and they have been able to you see this, like you saw the 2010s rotations had Justin Verlander, Drew Smiley, you had Rick Porcello, but positionally wise, again, they had to kind of go out to the free agent market. They, even with guys like, you think about Andy, you could talk about Andy Dirks, I guess, to a certain extent, of homegrown quote unquote guys, but this is actual contribution. You're talking about, if you look at the numbers of Spencer Torkelson, this just in terms of what he's been able to do, again, ignore the batting average. Yes, but the OPS is 955. That stands out. That's one. The power, again, back to back, he had 2 home runs in a game that he needed all the offense because the Twins were not going away. The Twins have been a very annoying team this year to face. Riley Greene is getting it done defensively, and he might be striking out a little bit more than he walks, but again, he's batting 315 with OPS of 956 the month of August. I'm not going to complain about that. There's nothing to complain about with this. But Kerry Carpenter, the biggest thing, Uper, I'll get to you about this. And Andrew Miller said it perfectly. I think he said it here in the YouTube chat perfectly. Tigers' development used to be so bad, they didn't know they had something until they had it. Amen. Amen to that, because that's 100% true. Because you look at guys like Fernando Rodney or Drew Smiley, who did things elsewhere because the team found out something. Same thing with, yeah. But anyways, Hubert, this is what I'm talking about right here. This is using your resources within.
What John is mentioning, how fun it was to watch that one particular game as a breath of fresh air. It's been building now for a couple of weeks with Carpenter's hitting streak and Riley Greene's maturation. How many times over the last 3 years when people say, what do they need? And I'd say power. They need power. They just don't have any. We're watching Brandon Dixon hit 15 homers and lead the team or whatever it was, It's really, really exciting for me to see Spencer Torkelson's power bat starting to play, to see Kerry Carpenter, showing that opposite field power. And we know Riley Greene's going to be, I believe, a 20 to 25 home run guy. With the injuries this year, he might only end up with maybe 12 or 13, but still, we know what's there. We've seen the power, and some of those missiles that he's hit, those are legit, And then they got, Jake Rogers chipping in. He's probably going to fit 16, 17 home runs himself. So when you look down in the minors with Colt Keith and Malloy, I think there's some power building there. So that part is turning around. I really believe they have the makings of an offense that's not going to be a 2 and 3 run machine, you know. And we're starting to see it. They're starting to sprinkle in some games with 6-7 runs, where we'd see one game with 7 runs every month maybe for a while there.
Yeah, and
now we're starting to see it more.
And I wanted to bring this up, and it might maybe ruffle some feathers in a bit, but you said like being able to identify talent. Do you think this is more on Scott Harris, you know, identifying and predicting that Torkelson and Greene and Carpenter will be this, or do you give a little credit to Al Avila, who did draft all 3 of those guys?
So Jed in the chat mentioned we have to give Big Al some credit, and truth of the matter is, it's a little bit of column A and column B. First and foremost, you can blame Al Avila for bringing up Spencer Torkelson too early, and when they didn't have a plan, they were either too cheap to sign a first baseman, or they didn't have a plan. Simple as that. Riley Greene, we had him as our number 1 prospect way early on over Tiger Minor Report because he was that good, because we've never seen anything like that in our duration of covering the system here probably for the last decade or so. So that being said, Riley Greene we thought he was a generational talent. As far as Kerry Carpenter goes, he went on the offseason in 2021 on his own and he got some help from the Tigers, and he listened to some of the instruction. But again, that was a combination of Ryan Garco bringing his own people in. And at that point, I can just tell you this for firsthand experience, probably within the last year, like the half year or so almost Avila was really much kind of out of power, or in terms of just like making key decisions, because a lot of those key decisions started becoming committee or by a group decision, except for the draft with Young and figurehead, if you will. So the analytics folks and people they brought in afterwards, like the pitching development kind of side of things, I don't think you get in 2019 and 2018, you get those kind of production from the pitching side of things, from the Bo Briskys of the world, who's becoming actually a decent reliever, or what you get from Alex Lang or Jason Foley, for that matter, who got a new grip. You don't see that in the past. I can tell you that straight hand, because even with Gregory Soto, although he's been traded, the Tigers did tell him to make a change to his windup. He used to have a very high kick, and he went down to the winter leagues, and that was the year before he became a closer, or it was right before he was starting to get the big saves numbers, and it worked for him. Again, before we've heard this from players, just do your thing, you'll be fine. That's not the case anymore, and it is good to see the progress on that, because outside of outside the big 3, if you will, the Triforce, I'm just gonna call them. So in the chat, we should put in there, do you want to call them the Triforce or the big 3? Because look, the reason why I want to go with the Triforce is because the big 3 is associated with the Detroit Motor City. I get it, but I just kind of tired of that cliche. I wish we could use something different other than the same. Yeah. Like for example, I mentioned this in my story about Justice Bigby, Watergate, or like we always go with the same old thing. We use gate after everything now. It doesn't have to be that way. So, but to some people in the comments say, OBK says, a GM's job is to build a contending team, not just draft a few good players. Matt Millen drafted Calvin Johnson. That didn't make him a good GM. That's a good point there. Brendan Morning says, Avila didn't know how to utilize draft picks. I actually agree with that. Johnson Family Farm says, John will just trade Greene and Torque this offseason if he was the GM.
Depends what I'm offered.
Yeah, well, it's the Lynn Henning theory. I'm going to call that the Lynn Henning way, because doesn't Henning want to trade everybody at this point? Like he's got
school out the door.
Yeah. Henning's just like,
And it's Lynn has been right a few times now. If you put it out there enough times, you're bound to be right occasionally, right? And he's always going to have the Curtis Granderson trade on his scoreboard. He called that one 3 months ahead of time.
Because he knew it was going to happen, Uber. He was friends with Avila.
I know.
Or friends with that front office. I'll tell you that right now.
I hear you. So, but if they want to make some big changes and really go for it this year, They're probably going to, you have to give something to get something. So we'll see what
Right.
happens.